My friends, the unthinkable has happened. A perfect score, long pondered to perhaps be impossible, has occurred. And in fact, it just kept on happening, and just keeps on happening, as there have been some incredible developments in the video game Pokémon Snap for the Nintendo 64 over the last few months, with numerous world records being broken, and many new strategies or setups discovered, with the game being pushed to its absolute limit. So let's take a look at this remarkable world of competition and everything that led to not only new records throughout the game of Pokémon Snap, but finally, once and for all, the truly amazing Charizard 4500.
Here we go!
So, as a two-sentence refresher, Pokémon Snap is a video game for the Nintendo 64 in which you take pictures of Pokémon in various situations on the game's handful of courses. These photographs are scored by Professor Oak using criteria such as size, pose, framing, and a couple of bonuses like whether there are multiple of the same Pokémon in the picture, and if the Pokémon finds itself in any special situation like Flying Pikachu or Graveler's Group Dance. Naturally, since there is a scoring element involved, just like many other video arcade games of days past, a competitive scene in this game has emerged over the years, many of the game's records being held by two Japanese gamers who I've mentioned on this channel before, Fekaterigo and Tsukige. But my friends, within the last few months, this scene has seen an incredible revolution with new tools unlocking deeper understanding of the game's mechanics than ever before, which has resulted in many new gamers setting world records and other incredible things. Let me explain. So a couple of important things happened here. First of all, it's pretty widely known that a lot of Nintendo 64 games do not emulate very well due to the difficulty in replicating the exact conditions of the Nintendo 64's natural hardware. And so some games have been challenging to decompile, examine, or perform tool-assisted speedruns or super plays at all for this very reason. I'm sure many of us have memories of playing Nintendo 64 on really clunky, crummy, and bizarre emulators that were quite a far ways off from the real thing, and thus, while they might have been a fun little dose of nostalgia to play, they were not effective in actually learning or developing anything significant when it comes to new strategies for competitive Nintendo 64 gameplay. In March 2025, a tool-assisted speedrunner by the name of Cool Hand Mike performed a couple of runs of Pokémon Snap, submitting one to tasvideos.org. His best run completed the game in 20 minutes and 24 seconds. Now, this is only actually 8 seconds faster than the console real-time attack record of 2032 by a player named Gunlap, done several years ago. And not only that, but much of Cool Hand Mike's TAS gameplay looks like this, staring at the sky to reduce lag, which, I know, coming from a guy who is historically a GoldenEye speedrunner, isn't exactly something I have the high ground on. But suffice to say, looking at the sky to reduce lag isn't all that awe-inspiring of an experience for the viewer. So what makes this TAS special? Well, you see, this tool-assisted speedrun was performed on a recent update of a popular emulator, Bizhawk 2.10, released in January 2025. And what's important about this version of the emulator is that it could actually play some of these difficult and clunky N64 games in a more authentic way. So this was actually quite a huge breakthrough, giving Pokémon Snap its first really viable and truly useful set of emulation tools after all these years. As a result of these tools existing, a few individuals, speedrunners and high-score scientists, began to take interest in seeing how far they could push Pokémon Snap. Two gentlemen, more well known for their work in the GoldenEye and Perfect Dark community, the Elite, with notable careers as speedrun scientists and strategy developers, ehmw and Icy Speedruns, were among those who turned their attention to Pokémon Snap, along with another esteemed gamer, KM91. ehmw, you may remember from previous videos, was the fellow who attempted to break the long-standing record of Charizard's high score, 4480, through sheer will of force and repetition. but after dozens of hours attempts and thousands of duplications of 4480, eventually felt like he was ramming his head into a wall, doing the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result. You know, insanity, as they say. Alas, the record remained at 4480. However, with these better tools at hand, renewed focus to the game in general, and a number of intelligent gamers collaborating, sharing, and developing new strategies, the history of competitive Pokémon Snap high-score gaming was about to change forever. So one great example of this Pokémon Snap revolution might be looking at the Pokémon Vileplume. Vileplume was one of those Pokemon where we weren't sure if a 1000 max size score was possible, with the world record for a very long time being stuck at 4680, that being 990 size, and the max pose score of 1350 for Vileplume's favorite song and the little dance he does during it. All that being doubled for good technique for Vileplume in the center of the frame gives 4680. You'll notice that Vileplume is one of those weird edge cases where you actually want to be a little bit off-center, just enough off-center to get a larger size thanks to the phenomenon known as square head theory in-game, but not off-center too much where you don't get your score doubled for good technique by Professor Oak. But sometimes the new tools and information provide just enough inspiration to take another deep look at a potential high score. And that's exactly what Japanese Pokemon Snap legend Tsukige did with Vileplume in February 2025. Tsukige would later write, "When Vileplume dances, it keeps turning towards you, but the first jump doesn't change direction. So when you stop playing the flute, it's at a slightly different angle from the front. I thought this was the problem. And while I was researching, I found that if I changed the angle a little bit, I could get a size of 1000. So I improved Fekaterago's setup from 2019. Tsukige's innovation with Vileplume was further documented in a tutorial on his Nico video channel. Playing the flute once, stopping to throw an apple, and then playing the flute again was just enough to change Vileplume's position slightly, making the 1000 score finally possible for a perfect score of 4700 points. Something long sought after for 20 years of high scoring chasing in this game, only made possible thanks to a deeper understanding and new perspective. And as a result, half a dozen other players have gone on to score the tied record of 4700 point Vileplume. Now that, my friends, is quite remarkable indeed. Lapras is another good example at the new tools and technique making the world record more attainable. You see, the way Lapras works is that you need to take a picture of one Lapras early from quite afar, and then the middle Lapras halfway through the stage is a little bit closer, take a picture of this one, and then towards the end, 3 Lapras will appear with the main one quite up close. The thing is, the 2 background Laprases spawn kind of randomly up and down. So while ideally you want a picture with all 3 Laprases fully out of the water with their necks craned and extended to maximize the total size points and friend points all at the same time, this would either require immense luck or some way to predictably manipulate your luck by using certain patterns and knowledge on the course. Well, that's exactly what all the lads figured out. While Fekaterago had achieved a score of 3540 going back several years, Icy and MW were able to match this score in early 2025, Icy doing so in large part thanks to a consistent setup strategy he found using very specific movements and button presses to consistently end up with all 3 Laprases surfing and craning their necks at the very same time. You can look at a pretty complex Pokemon to photograph like Cloyster. In the past, it was kind of unknown exactly how to get the 3 Cloysters spawning out of the river towards the end of the stage in a predictable, organized, and photographable manner in order to get a good shot and threaten the record. However, by using the emulator tools and the ease of resetting save states from trial and error, we can learn that looking certain directions and pressing certain buttons at certain times can indeed very predictably get a good Cloyster setup towards the end of the stage, offering you a good chance at the ideal shot. MW used this in order to tie Feketerago's old world record of 5210. So, I think you get the point. Modern tools allowing players to look into the game's memory while resetting using save states and other analytics has resulted in some new record scores, or previous scores being much easier and more consistent to match. But here's where it gets truly crazy. MW, who had spent countless hours attempting to score the theoretical maxed score 4500 on Charizard, figured he would use these tools to have another look at whether or not such a score was possible. Recall, in a previous video I made back in 2022, we figured that there was this tidbit of Charizard's stomach hiding under the lava no matter what, which may have been the reason we could only ever get a size score of 990 when combined with his max pose of 1250, which resulted in the Charizard score of 4480. Despite this, MW went through with the definition of insanity, trying for countless hours, thousands of 4480 duplications over the years, only for that perfect 4500 Charizard to continue evading his grasp. That is, until these new tools came along. Particularly, MW was able to analyze which RAM addresses visible in the emulator corresponded to size values, and from there was able to hone in on what may or may not have been possible with Charizard at that point. And on March 30th, 2025, to the Pokémon Snap Discord, MW posted this image. A tool-assisted Charizard 4500 along with the BK2 file, the file type native to the Bizhawk 2.10 emulator, with all the data proving that such a thing could be possible on real console. Now, just because something gets emulated, especially in a Nintendo 64 setting, it doesn't always mean it's truly possible on a real console, but given the fidelity of this emulator, it certainly gave MW enough hope and, frankly, real concrete data to know exactly what to do in order to try to get the shot for real. So he picked up his controller, powered on his Pokémon Snap, and got to work. And just one day later, on April 1st, 2025, and no, this was not in April Fool's, around 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, MW performed this run.
Yes. Well done. Welcome back.
Now that, my friends, is truly remarkable. Imagine how good that must have felt to finally achieve this perfect record score that you'd been chasing for 2.5 years. Finally, the tools and data advanced to a point where MW could run the numbers, realize such a thing was possible, and actually go out and perform it. You'll notice he seems to take the picture on literally the last frame possible before the level fades out. And the photo is pretty well centered, only slightly off center, which is likely the exact unique set of pixels that would score the 1000 size on Charizard. So it really goes to show the power and utility that these new tools have, and how they are contributing to continued improved scores in Pokémon Snap. One last Pokemon I'll talk about today is the one and only Butterfree, or Smetbo in German. And I bring that up because in a video I published last year, I discussed how in all 3 known strategy guides or high score tables, purporting to show high scores achieved by developers of the game or writers of the strategy guides published back around 1999, the time of the game's release, in all of English, Japanese, and German, the high score for Butterfree is shown as 4960. This is the only score which is consistent across all 3 documents in all 3 languages, which modern Pokemon Snap players have not yet been able to obtain. Using the new tools and understandings of the game mechanics, Setups have been found for more consistent Butterfree attempts, and these setups have resulted in a new record for Butterfree of 4900 by MW, and even a new tool-assisted record of 4940. Yet a score of 4960 continues to evade the community for now. Was the score published more than 25 years ago actually legit, or some kind of made-up score or typo? Perhaps we will never know. Regarding the possibility of a 4960 Butterfree, Icy writes, I spent dozens of hours researching Butterfree, including a triple Butterfree strat, and found nothing new. I wouldn't be surprised if one guy just said 4960 for some reason and the rest just referenced it. MW writes, and the 4940 TAS took me a long time of brute forcing. 4960 definitely never actually happened. It was probably a misprint that, like Icy said, every other guide then copied. And KM91 says, even if one day we could TAS it, that still wouldn't prove that they got the score in 1999. They most likely got 4690 and had a typo. So hey, there's what the top analysts and scientists of Pokemon Snap today believe in regards to this 4960 Butterfree score, so who knows? But what we do know is that it seems like this revolution in Pokemon Snap is just the beginning, just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to development and competition in Pokemon Snap high scores for the Nintendo 64, with many more scores and records likely to fall in the near future. There have been numerous other scores broken over this time, so if you'd like to hear me talk about those, let me know in the comments or by liking this video. Alright, that'll do for now, my friends. There's the story of how the perfect Charizard finally happened after all these years. Congratulations to MW, and to Icy Speedruns and KM91 and everyone else on achieving great records these days. Thanks to you for watching, and of course to the channel members and Patreon members for supporting my work. Stay true, my friends, and I will see you in the next stream or video.